Hello wrestling fans, I'm Tom Colohue here on the Tom Colohue YouTube channel, snazzy name, I know, and today we're going to go through a quick Raw review of everything that happened last night. Raw opened with the Kevin Owens show, slightly different now in that we've got a crowd. NXT talents dotted all around the place, a whole lot of different people, including some of them who've been on commentary before, so that was a bit of a positive surprise. And it's very good as well because it gave the wrestlers something to really sink their teeth into, that immediate feedback of you've done this good or you haven't done this great. It really added to it when we saw Apollo Crews kick someone in the head and the crowd would pop. It's still not a crowd, and I do feel it feels a bit different. It's jarring at first because I just got used to having no crowd after spending a long time getting used to having a full crowd. So it's a bit jarring at first, but over the course of the night I did get used to it. The NXT talent was supposedly all social distance. That did reduce over the course of the night, but if you were standing for 3 hours I'm sure it would as well. They had plexiglass around the whole ringside area so people could get real up close without actually engaging with the wrestlers in any way, because to my knowledge they are tested at different sites, with some exceptions as I'll come to later. The KO show would talk about the women's triple threat match, which will be happening later in the night. Essentially, you see this quite a lot. The first segment sets up the end of the second hour. The top of the first hour sets up the main event segment at the end of the third hour. So this is how they usually break it up. It was nice to see Kevin Owens used in this way, because first he would introduce Asuka, then he would be interrupted by Charlotte, and he would tell her, oh, she's lost a feather. He'd be interrupted by Natalya, and he would take down his entire set because of what she did to it the week before. And then Nia Jax came out, really everyone there from the triple threat and the champion they would be competing with should they win. And Kevin Owens got out the ring and said, look, I know where this is going, don't punch Nia Jax in the face. Then Asuka backhanded Nia Jax in the face. It was very clear, I felt, how this match was going to end, even last week. But now, of course, in the ring, as part of the KO show, the fact that Asuka and Jax fought and then separately Charlotte and Natalya fought definitely suggested who we would have as the winner. They've really telegraphed this one. For the first match of the night, Andrade lost his United States Championship to a recently returned Apollo Crews. This might seem a shock initially, but then you consider that Apollo Crews has a military background and it is the United States Championship he's competing with on Memorial Day weekend. It doesn't seem as much of a surprise then, does it? There was a moment when Angel Garza was interviewed backstage during this match. He was, of course, watching the TV, and he was distracted by a beautiful interviewer, made a long and quite intimate explanation of some sort of making love allegory, while Crews and Andrade were arriving around in the background. It was hot. It was hot. After the match, Apollo Crews cut a promo really from the heart, and this is where I feel adding a few people into that crowd really helped, because he was talking to people instead of talking to a camera. It's worth checking out the promo. It's just for the fact that it's rare that we see a championship win celebrated properly. I do feel championship wins would mean a hell of a lot more if everyone celebrated like the B team. Go, go, go. Seth Rollins talked about Rey Mysterio holding Rey's mask in his hand. Name dropped Dominic Mysterio, which was interesting. Next week we're going to have a retirement ceremony for Rey Mysterio hosted by Seth Rollins. Gotta be honest, I don't trust it. The Iconics would come down to the ring, apologise to each other for teasing the breakup last week. This storyline may have been abandoned, I think we're still going to see it going, and then made it clear that they would still be challenging Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross for the tag team championships. With not many women's tag teams, we're probably going to see some quite long feuds, especially now that Asuka and Kairi Sane are no longer in the running for this. We don't have Jax and Tamina as a tag team anymore. It's a very threadbare division. One thing that does really stand out in this segment was that Nikki Cross given the microphone and given room to go. Nikki Cross has had a very solid push since she joined SmackDown and paired up with Alexa Bliss. Initially, most people expected this team to break up, however it has not. They have turned face in the process, which is hard to do with Alexa Bliss at times. And it's very rare that Nikki Cross is the one in that tag team to do the speaking. Alexa Bliss obviously very talented with a microphone, probably one of my favourites when it comes to holding a microphone. But it was Nikki Cross who was able to speak quite a lot, And I think it's very telling of how highly recognized she is in that company. Everyone loves Nikki Cross. I've had the pleasure of interviewing Nikki, and she is such a genuine, heartfelt person. We've seen moments between Nikki and Stephanie McMahon, for example. She is so popular backstage. It's great to have a moment like this. We will see if she retains the championship, but at the very least we can say that of the people who were called up when she was called up, which includes people like EC3 and Lars Sullivan, I reckon she's done the best. One thing I do want to ask based on that, and I would love it if you would comment on this, do you think we could see or should see a return to the Nikki Cross versus Asuka feud that was so well received in NXT? Personally, I really would love to see it. Going into the second hour, Drew McIntyre was on the MVP lounge. They played a bit off their limited history from before WrestleMania, when MVP was trying to pitch himself as the next manager for Drew, but Drew said he doesn't need him. The whole time you're wondering, where is Bobby Lashley? Bobby Lashley did eventually come down to the ring, and Drew McIntyre took this opportunity to attack MVP. Usually, I'm not the biggest fan of that because it's a bit dark, it's a bit heelish. MVP had done nothing really offensive to Drew in any way. But then when Drew McIntyre does a kip up in a full suit, fine by me, fine by me. After that, Lashley would take MVP out of the ring and flee the scene. This is something that is beginning to be a bit of a problem in the WWE. We're seeing it quite a lot over the last few years. If you are building someone up as a monster heel, don't then turn them into a coward the second they're faced with a proper opportunity. Drew McIntyre is presenting a proper opportunity now as a champion, and Lashley cannot be running away. Lashley needs to be stepping up here. This will continue to be a problem a bit later, but I'll get onto that in a bit. During a backstage segment to hype up further the triple threat women's match, we see Natalya answering a phone call during an interview. She has a bit of a back and forth with her husband. She makes it very clear that it's her husband, and then it goes on from there. Natalya has been on an interesting trajectory recently. I would just like to see her take a few more chances at a longer feud with Shayna Baszler. She's very technically gifted, very talented, and I feel if she gets a bit more aggression, a bit more intensity, she can take that win. I'd like to see that. However, it looks like we're going towards marital problems. I don't want to see that. I want Natalya to have some consistent booking for once, because she's been all over the place. Her booking so often has been about other people, or just baffling to begin with. Just let her have some great matches. Drop this wherever it's going. I want to give it the time of day. I want to give it time to develop. But at the same time, I just don't want to see someone have marital problems on my TV. That's not entertainment to me. Angel Garza gets a bit of a shock win over Kevin Owens, especially with how hard Kevin Owens has been booked recently going into Mania. It's a very good moment for Angel Garza, but there is a bit of a caveat in that he focused on Kevin Owens' injured knee. Makes sense, keeps Owens from looking particularly bad here, but it's a very powerful moment. And really, Angel Garza is the only one left in Team Vega who's actually got any consistency and been getting any wins. Andrade, unfortunately, after losing his championship, attacked a lot of the backstage area with a big stick. So Zelina Vega may need to recruit. With no sport on TV other than WWE, the Street Profits and the Viking Raiders are there to give you everything you might miss. Next week's ice hockey, followed by a synchronized swimming semi-final, and then most importantly, competitive glass blowing. It's going to be epic. The greatest glass blowing ever. These skits have been back and forth for me. There have been some I've liked, there have been some I haven't liked. The golf course segment ranks about the middle for me. There was some entertainment value for it, but I felt they hit the same notes too often. Ivar and Meat. And they've done this before, really, and even though it's like a different sport, it's golf rather than basketball, the Viking Raiders played off that they didn't understand the sport and then said, oh, but we let you win. It's too similar to me, and to be honest, golf really probably not that entertaining on a WWE broadcast. They could have done more for me, but at least they did something. They're hitting the exact same notes though, and they need to move on at least to something in the ring. Thankfully, they did seem to pick up on that, because the Street Profits are announced after this segment as going to be in the main event. They weren't announced for the main event, but they will be in the main event against MVP and Bobby Lashley, which of course I referred to previously. The tag team champions will be going up against the guy who will be challenging for the WWE Championship and his manager. I wonder where this is going. This week's Messiah segment was Aleister Black and Humberto Carrillo going up against Austin Theory and Buddy Murphy, who is of course just Murphy now, but I will call him Buddy Murphy until the end of time. This, as you might expect, hell of a match. Very fast paced, shorter than I would like, but I think this was a bit of a problem throughout the whole show, as a lot of talent have returned to the WWE. For example, Owens, Orton, Edge. We are seeing shorter matches than we had previously. I think that's a shame, because a lot of these matches we could do more, but a lot of the backstage segments are important as well. The match was very good. Also, I think it's very good for Austin Theory picking up the win over Humberto Carrillo. It's a shame for Humberto because ultimately he is the enhancement talent in this situation. He's getting on TV and that's a good place to be, but he really hasn't been able to achieve much since he came to Raw. It's been a while now. Hopefully that's something that changes sooner rather than later. The win, however, does confirm that Austin Theory is a bit more of a big deal than he was previously, and there was an after-match segment where Seth Rollins was just masterful. He had his disciples threatening Humberto Carrillo to hold his eye against the steps in the same way. It's very rare we see steel steps making such a prominent comeback in WWE programming, I tell you that, outside of the tables, ladders and chairs and stairs event. But oh god, is that where they're going? Oh, that may be where they're going. I'm not going to speak it again because I don't want to will it into existence, but this segment was extremely good. Aleister Black was trying to be menacing and threatening, as Aleister Black is indeed menacing and threatening and does very well at that, with a chair, but he was talked down by Seth Rollins in order to save Carrillo from further punishment. Very good. Check out this promo if you can, because Seth Rollins, this might be the best Seth Rollins has ever been, and that comes after a long career of doing great things from Seth Rollins. Edge cuts a promo backstage. He hypes up the Undertaker's Last Ride series, which I suppose you got to get your plug in somewhere, but was able to use it in an interesting way, referring to his interviews during that when he was still retired. Now, technically that's kayfabed, because he did know in October at least, during Hell in a Cell, that he was going to be returning at Royal Rumble. That's when the backstage, the wrestlers backstage were made aware of it. Credit to them for keeping it quiet for so long. Got to give them their dues there. But so that technically that's been kayfabed, but I think that's a good way to phrase it, a good way to frame it, and a good way to look at the questions that he raised there. When should you stop? Now for Edge, he's recently come back. He had to answer these questions for years previously. When have you been going for too long? Well, he's back now and I don't think anyone's complaining. The women's triple threat rides between the second hour and third hour, which is an important place, especially when you consider the rating drop that they had between the second and third hour last week. This shows the faith they have in these three women, and additionally in a fourth woman, because Asuka came down onto commentary. I love Asuka on commentary, so enthusiastic. And in addition to that, her analysis is incredible. Really, only Samoa Joe can really catch on with her experience and her level of intricacy. Tom Phillips did her a real disservice ignoring so much when she was calling the moves and calling the strategy of Charlotte Flair. And shameful on Phillips, shameful. The match was solid, as I've mentioned before, fast-paced because a lot of these matches seem to have been slimmed down. Jax early on was put through a table by Flair and Natalya working together. She was able to rally late on, dominate the affair without being too overtly powerful. Flair and Natalya still had moments of looking good. However, I think everyone predicted, and accurately predicted, Nia Jax would be beating Natalya. Flair, for her part, was there either to pop a rating or just to make people think, oh, maybe Nia won't win. And some people did, to be fair, because it's Charlotte Flair and you can never write off a Flair. We now get to the backstage promo segment of the third hour, which for me is getting to be a bit intrusive. We get a lot of promos back to back, broken up by adverts, and I can understand why people would turn off during this point. I would have liked to have seen a match in between some of these, but we are where we are. So, going through my notes, because there are quite a lot of them. Initially, we had a 24/7 title segment, which was R-Truth cutting one promo and then Gronk cutting a return promo. Now, I did mention in a previous report that you can read on Sportskeeda that there are disagreements between USA, WWE, and Fox as to the brand versus brand invitational. The USA wants more spotlight on the 24/7 championship. We're seeing it come back now. It hasn't really been mentioned since WrestleMania. Gronk is now the champion. He's not on site. He's not working with the WWE at the moment, so he's cutting segments with a different background. He was at least present here. He did sign a contract for so many dates, and the fact that he's not doing them right now means we're likely to see more of Gronk in the later year when the pandemic is over. Whether or not you're a fan of Gronk, I personally don't know the man, so I can't really speculate. I'd like to see what he does in the ring before I really comment. But that said, at least he's fulfilling his requirements. Ric Flair appeared via satellite, or probably once again a pre-recorded segment, to put over Randy Orton, someone he knows extremely well after all. This is at least a different way of doing things. Much like in the tag division, they've got the Raiders and the Profits having a very different feud, which has a lot more brotherhood and is a lot more well-natured and a good way to do face versus face. Right here, we are seeing a way of sort of commenting on the match. I don't think Ric Flair's the last person we're going to hear from. Christian definitely is someone I think we're going to be hearing from very soon, or his opinion. And I would hope maybe we get comment from Batista. Why not? Liv Morgan had her own promo using the same backdrop as last week. Probably these segments are being filmed back to back in an outside location, possibly her own home. These segments are important. They give you a chance to get to know her character a little more, get her catchphrases over and develop a fan base. There has been talk about getting Liv Morgan back in the ring, but if you're going to do that, there is an important question. Will she win? If she doesn't win, it's a burial according to some fans. So maybe it is better to just have her on promos, have her on TV, developing the fan base, getting to communicate with people more. She's very good at social media and they know that when it comes to Liv Morgan. This was something they can work with that doesn't have her losing matches. Finally, they announced that Seth Rollins and Aleister Black would be wrestling next week on Raw. First off, what a match that's going to be. Any Aleister Black match so far has just been an incredible match. This is on the offshoot. But his feud with AJ Styles was great. His feud with Murphy was great. Now we're in a situation where he's feuding with Seth Rollins. It's looking beautiful. It also does open up some options for Backlash where I expected this match might be, because it certainly suggests we're going to see Rey Mysterio back sooner rather than later. And in addition, we could see, for example, Rey Mysterio, Humberto Carrillo and Aleister Black against the Monday Night Messiah faction. Or you could swap out Carrillo for Dominic Mysterio, who has been training, who has been working hard, and who could be involved here. I don't think he will, because he would have to be cleared and checked out for the coronavirus before going into it. However, at the moment, Humberto Carrillo can fill that role. I just hope he isn't still the enhancement talent there as well. Our final match, Street Profits versus MVP and Bobby Lashley, is a real showcase for Bobby Lashley's brutality. It's a short main event. As I've mentioned, main events have been incredibly short recently, and they've not had a lot of time. The Street Profits did not get a lot in here. Bobby Lashley late on would tag in, would use a full Nelson, win the match, and then that would be it. The Street Profits would vanish. They're your Raw Tag Team Champions, and they've just been Braun Strowman, essentially. It's a difficult situation for the Street Profits. It does not help their feud with the Viking Raiders. That's a negative for me. It did, however, make Bobby Lashley look like more of a credible threat. However, the following segment was less so in that regard. Drew McIntyre would come down to the ring, would face off with Lashley, and would start the attack. We would have 2 or 3 people called to help from the crowd, which is confusing. They must have been previously vetted. And they would come down for something of a very minor sort of socially distanced pull-apart brawl. Maybe not the time for that. That said, Bobby Lashley and Drew McIntyre really weren't able to get many hits in. There were a few pulled punches, there weren't many great moments as it were, and even on a distracted Drew McIntyre, Bobby Lashley wasn't able to get much in. Bobby Lashley needs a moment where he is at least shown to be on par with Drew McIntyre. I don't feel he's being built as effectively as he could be because he's working with people who aren't near that sort of top level main event as per WWE booking. He needs at least a moment where he's able to fight back and really able to look strong and put Drew McIntyre down. Drew had a lot of those in the build to his match with Lesnar. Now's the time to give back. Overall, I would say this was a good show. I've used the word solid quite a lot and I do stand by that. Apollo Crews winning the United States Championship was a very good moment. Everything Seth Rollins is doing is top draw, and I felt the match quality was very good. Women's Triple Threat, for example, got the attention it deserved with the opening segment and a promo segment at the end of the first hour for Natalya, which would originally have hyped it at least a little bit, but it was focused on Natalya's own personal storyline at the time. Less impressive for me, Bobby Lashley and Drew McIntyre isn't really hitting the heights for me yet, but there are a few weeks still to go. The golf segment, it just didn't really cut through for me. Also, I'm starting to dislike how many promo segments they're putting together near the end of the show. It's too much back to back. Break it down earlier on in the show. At least, to be fair, they're not saving it for YouTube and WWE.com, so at least people are getting on TV, but we can't have so many back to back. It damages interest in staying to watch the rest of it. My Twitter poll after the show shows a 53% good rating, and then the second was 30% for great. More than half of people who voted said it was good. That's a positive for the WWE. I've got to say, in the no fan era as it has unfortunately become, Raw and SmackDown have been doing quite well. SmackDown has improved for me, even though it does remain quite formulaic. Meanwhile, Raw have been focusing on a lot of newer talent, pushing them, and even though it's a shame we're not seeing people like Jinder Mahal, Ricochet and Cedric Alexander, we are still seeing a lot of people get over with the talent that they have. That's been my Raw review. Please do let me know what you thought down in the comments, and thank you very much for joining me.